into a relationship that I knew I was not supposed to go into. Hey bloomers! I am Danielle Freckleton. Welcome to Blooming by Grace, a space where we use grace to chart our journey. We all have had challenges, fears, failures, but no matter what it is, this is the place, the only space where we will bloom by grace. And today we are privileged to have with us Nevisia Bernard, a friend of mine from one of my TV classes. Yes, and today we'll be talking about Pandora's box. Let's see what is in this box. All right, Nevicius. I'm here and I'm thinking about relationships and teenagers.
Right.
And I would have understood that, especially as Christian teenagers, we have a lot of questions as it relates to
We do, and sometimes they're not
relationship.
answered.
Yes, and sometimes they are not answered. And so today, Nevisa and I, we're going to try our best to go a little bit into relationships, insecurities, and several other stuff that lies in the Pandora's box. So I remember vividly. I remember like it was just yesterday.
Right.
I I would say rushed, Nevisa. I would say I would have rushed into a relationship that I knew I was not supposed to go into. But I mean, them say we live and we learn, and so
Right.
I had to get the dirtier end of the stick, as many would say. But we bless the Lord same way.
Indeed. Because
And so, what would you say as it relates to relationships? What do you have to say? Because you would have been here a while. You would have been on the face of the earth in a little while, more than we. So
that made me that just made me sound old. But anyway. um, I would say when it comes to relationships, it's different for everybody. For me, right? I have or had, I have to say I've grown from there. I had this concept as it relates to relationship that it's like those fairy tale things or what we see in the movies. They gloss it over, make it seem so perfect. Like, oh, we're going to meet or boyfriends in high school or girlfriends in high school. You're going to experience that, locker system. You probably meet each other right next to each other. Your lockers next door, open, you open it, and like boom, when you go to close it, you're like, oh my goodness, and it probably started like that. Or maybe it was a friend that you didn't even know this person had feelings, and you're going to have this wonderful high school, whirlwind kind of a relationship, and you're going to grow, go to college, and then eventually going to marry. Did that
sadly,
happen? No.
sadly, I mean, let me say we have to hats off to those that it had happened for, because we know several others would have met in high school and journeyed through
True.
high school into
So
adulthood.
true.
But that's not the case for
For
everybody.
everybody,
And
right?
so I'm not gonna come up in here on this platform and tell people that look,
It's
it's gonna
impossible.
be that way for you. No, I mean, no, it's true. It's least likely that that's going to befall you. And so,
Right.
what would have happened in the whole journey of Christianity and teens being Christians early, and I mean being Christians in general and going into high school and seeing friends and seeing everybody else? It's almost like you're saying to yourself, I like this guy. He likes me. We're having a good relationship. And I would say this is where most persons fall into the trap of getting themselves into sexual relations
Or
before
sometimes the
marriage.
wrong one. Sometimes the wrong relationships, because from another perspective, it can also be that. Let me give you a better scenario before I jump into the whole idea. When I was growing up, I remember saying once to somebody that I used to convince myself that I like people. And some people like, how is that even possible? And it's mainly because, as you mentioned, you see your friends getting into relationships and you're like, all right, nothing not happening with me. So what's happening? You probably just see this guy, you probably know this person for a while now. But for some reason, you probably just look at like, he look alright, him look cute. Alright. It probably could work. You start convincing is like that's where the line of thought would start like it. And then out of the blue, you don't know where these emotions, as you would say, all of a sudden you have that butterfly in your tummy when you see this person and all these things, and you have this fantasy now that you start building. And before you know it, you find yourself in the wrong relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you said, you start thinking that your friends are having certain type of relationships. You want to have it too. And whether it is that you end up in, as we say, sex before marriage or just the wrong one, a lot of times we ended up at the nasty end. We get the nasty end of the stick, you know?
And it's to really talk about it. Never say if we're really supposed to talk about it. It's not really condemning anybody. We're not here condemning anybody because we
Right.
once were teenagers and we knew what it was like. And not only teenagers, but young adults do struggle with these things too. Even elderly adults, they
Mm-hmm.
do struggle with these things. Elderly per se. So it's all a journey, and we all are struggling with these things. But even as you rightly made mention just now, just because you see a friend doing it, you think, okay, it is okay, so I can do it too. And this, as a result, causes a lot of insecurities because sometimes when we see our friends being in a relationship and you're in a stage, I was at that stage once where I used to feel that I wasn't good enough
Mm-hmm.
because probably you would see men calling to your friends, but they weren't calling to you.
To
And
you.
this is it was during university, and as I grow, I would have realized that this is not just a me problem. I would have met several persons who would have had
And
that
similar,
notion that maybe they weren't pretty enough, or
right?
maybe they weren't sexy enough, or
Not
whatever,
intelligent.
that not
Intelligent.
intelligent, yes,
That could
enough.
be part of
And
it.
so, and so they sold themselves short sometimes, and
Right.
it just never worked out.
Never.
Or it's almost like they have this self pity because
Right.
they think nobody is looking at them. But I remember what quote gave me assurance when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember it word for word, but it went something like cheap things goes first. Something along that line. I don't remember. And
Mm.
so it's almost like when you are on the expensive side,
Right.
not everybody wants to buy you, or not everybody wants to come buy you. It
That's
went something
interesting.
like that, and even as I grew, that was what gave me a little bit of confidence, because it gets hard sometimes, especially as a Christian teenager. It's like you don't. It's almost like you feel like you're not dressing like everybody else is dressing, and it creates a level of you
As you
lose your
say,
self-worth, and it can
yes,
cause that's where a lot of people lose their identity because they feel as though they need to fit in.
exactly.
But
And you find, right, as you mentioned, identity, looking on the crisis that lots of teens are going through now, where a lot of them are saying, for instance, that they're bisexual or whatever. Sad to say that whether we want to accept it or not, it's in the church. And we don't talk about it as much because it is like it's a taboo topic. And because a lot of teens are thinking like persons are going to look on me a certain way, they don't express the struggles that they are enduring in these crises. So they're struggling to express themselves even. And identifying yourselves with certain people might end up coming from just somebody who looks on you and probably gives you a very nice compliment.
Mhm.
You have that low
Mhm.
self esteem that's been hanging around for a while. You're there thinking, I'm not worth anything. And then there's this random person that you probably don't know. Or even if you know the person, you probably don't know the type of environment this person is within, and knowing that this person could probably be thinking to groom you. But nonetheless, you're thinking, oh, this person cares about me. And slowly they start slipping into a certain lifestyle without them even realizing sometimes. They start
Mhm.
making assumptions like, oh, maybe because this person said this, maybe they are feeling this way about me. And I mean, it could just be like a friend as well. And before they know it, they start questioning, is it a case that I like females, or is it a case that I like males? These are some of the issues that may arise. That might not be the case for everybody, you know. But again, losing yourself can be in so many ways, not just identifying yourself as they would say, your sexual identity, but losing yourself in general, because you start looking for that level of comfort, I guess you could say,
Mhm. In
from what,
somebody else, yes.
in
In
somebody
somebody
else's
else,
view
yeah.
of you. And you don't spend much time, because as you mentioned about being younger, I remember struggling with having that low self-esteem. I didn't have that, or
Mhm.
as I don't remember where I came across it, but they were saying as Christians, um, the Bible talk about esteem, and you're not to esteem yourself. So they rather to put it as self-worth. I liked the idea. So I had a low self-worth. I had a low view of myself. And I think it's the change started after one of these what they call it, NYS, National Youth Service. Those days they still had camps. Boy, that made me sound
Mhm.
real old. But anyway, but
Mhm.
I remember going and I met this female soldier that was in charge of the females, and we had a little female talk, and she was like, look here, it's not every time that a guy is going to give you a compliment that you should just willingly take it. She said some of them, there, the minute you say thank you and you smile, is like they use that as an opening.
As an invitation, yeah.
And, and she was saying basically, if they say, wow, you look nice, just turn around and said, yes, I looked in the mirror. And
Mm.
she said, it sounds very disrespectful, it sounds like you're being rude. But, and at first, I mean, it took a while. And shortly after, a very close cousin of mine, she died. But there was one thing I took from her death, and I wasn't very open to people for different challenges that I would have had. So I was a bit closed off, except for
Mhm.
persons that I was very close to. And I remember she was always somebody that was smiling. So during the time that she was sick and everything, she was always this bubbly, vibrant person. And I was like, she's gone, but I want that memory to remain with me by trying to
Mhm.
do that much. I want to learn to smile more. And I used to just get up after a while, and sometimes it felt weird doing it. And I would just look in the mirror and I say, you're pretty,
Yes.
you're pretty. And it got to a point that it's less of a case that you're trying to convince yourself, and more of a case that, boy, you just have that one of those moments like, yo,
You're pretty,
you
you're
look
pretty.
good.
Girl, I've had some of those moments, to be honest, that me literally just, just you just sit and you're like, I'm beautiful. And that's what we have to do. I mean, not only as girls, because not only
Yes, too.
females struggle with these things, but males do struggle as well. And so we have to get into a place where we accept us for who we really are. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, nobody nobody has anything perfect. Nobody, you might have a pretty face, but you have a nasty character, and that's
Right.
just the truth. And so then you realize that beauty is not so much external, but it's what flows from within. And
Mm-hmm.
so as teenagers, and as we come apart and go on daily, we have to as adults, not just teenagers per se, but adults too, we have to come in and understand that, look, we are who we are. We are beautiful just the way we are. Because
Yeah,
it's not just external. I would normally say external now go ahead.
true.
But we are seeing now this not going to heaven. What will go to heaven is your character. That's what you'll have for life. And so we are here in this world to
Mm-hmm.
develop our characters. That's really what we are here to do, to develop our characters, to become better individuals.
And that's why we
And
need
so
to value ourselves more.
yeah.
Value ourselves because you know when you think about it, when you mention talk about being in relationships that are just not right, can you imagine somebody approach you and you're like, all right, we don't necessarily want to get into a relationship per se,
Mm-hmm.
but we're good friends, we want to explore. you know let's just explore what
Mama,
it's like.
and then that's how listen, and that's how you have this whole friends with benefits thing, and this thing. I remember there was once a time where it was so much a thing, and probably maybe because I'm not in high school again, I don't really know, but I can just imagine you have these things. You
Mm,
have these things where people wants to be friends with benefits. And I remember this female, she struggled, like literally struggled with being friends with benefits, and
mhm,
it almost caused her to be a wreck. Because females are emotionally attached. And so
exactly.
males are physically attached. They are attracted to what they see. We are attracted to what we feel. And
Exactly.
so after a
Oh,
while,
when
she was devastated, man.
there,
Listen,
you mentioned something, and I remember talking to a friend of mine, a male, and I remember saying something of a similar is context, and he was saying it's not that males are not emotionally connected, and I was taken aback because I'm like,
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a normal thing that we hear. Females are emotionally
Well
attached,
connected, yes.
but
Mm-hmm.
I think the better way that we can also look at it is, as my mother would say, for a female, having sex with a male is like he's saying, I love you. While that might not necessarily be the case for a number of males. Because if his mindset was not there for a relationship from the get-go, then there is no way that after sex that he's going to think
All
otherwise.
right, Melissa, we do not want YouTube to block the video, so we are going to call it Apple. Okay, Miss? We
Okay.
are going to say Apple. We do not want the people to run we off of the internet. So it's Apple.
Apple it is. But
Apple. After eating that apple, yeah.
yes, the forbidden fruit. Depending on the context. But yes, it's so easy for us to think that it's okay because we put a low view of ourselves to think, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this person went out of his way or her way to say this, then this is how this person may feel. Well, that
Mm-hmm.
might not necessarily be the case. For a female, of course, she would grow so attached after a while
Yes.
that, as you say, it would create a wreck at some point in which, yeah, we have to be very careful. Have to.
Because even as teenagers, I remember in school, you'd hear many people talking about the apple, and there would be so much pressure placed on us.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's almost like you hear everybody doing this thing, and you're seeing, or you probably hear friends coming, and you probably see it on some people, or you assume that they would have gone down that stretch, and it's like, as a Christian, I had thought sometimes like wondering, okay, or whatever, but then you realize that at the end of the day, it's all about self control. If you can
That
control
too.
yourself, yes, especially as a Christian, and control your thoughts,
And some people like
then
that's impossible because when you want it, you just want it. But as you said, it's all about controlling yourself. As a teacher, I think I was in grade 5 when I had this teacher that she said, when you feel these urges and everything, go drink some water, drink some cold water. And growing up, you're like, huh? It kind of never made much sense to you then, because I mean,
Mhm.
at 11, what would you know about these things? I mean, you're learning, and she's giving the advice to say you're going to grow up and you're going to feel these things, but wait, control yourself, drink some water, find some work to do.
I mean, I'm just honest, Lovisa, it's not so easy. Even though I just say
True.
self control and control yourself, it's not so easy for us to control ourselves because, especially when the feeling comes on, listen, it's not a walk in the park.
It's an
But what we
exercise of
can
its
do,
own.
and then you say like you hear like just pray in the moment, which does help to be honest. But then we also have to understand that not everybody is spiritually connected or there in their journey just yet with they can just feel these feelings and just run to prayer. I mean it's not that easy. But what
Yeah.
we have to do, yeah, what we have to do, we have to come to terms with those feelings, accept that they're there, and process them in such a way that will not act upon them. So will not act
Not only
upon just
that,
mere feelings.
it,
Yeah.
it's also finding out what the triggers are, because in everything we have triggers. So this is no different. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it is that you saw something that your friend was doing and it started making you think about, wanting to be in relationships or that kind of a relationship, or it can be, I am guilty of watching a lot of romance movies and reading novels. Now, mind you, I am going to tell you that if your brain is not screwed right,
Mm-hmm.
and know that, all right, this is not the place. It's like at some point, sometime when these books, as they would say, get so steamy, you're like, all right, let's put this down for a while.
Yes, I mean your imagination. I wasn't one to read, to be honest. I still don't like reading, but I do it because we have to read. But I love, probably still love watching. I don't like watching movies, but if you can get me somewhere, you can get me watch a romantic movie or something along that line. And even as you just rightfully say, it does happen
Right.
where when it comes upon the upper scenes and you see all these things happen, it brings your mind to a place that it's almost like there's no coming back.
Indeed.
But I mean, to be honest, as young as I look back now, I mean, I never was ever perfect. People look at me and probably think, okay, she's perfect. No, it should, and in fact, none of we are perfect. We all fell at least one point or two in our lives. We did things that we weren't so pleased with, and that's why I did a video earlier that says, what advice would you give to your younger self? Because sometimes us as we grow, and we look back there like, okay, there are certain things that we think we could have done differently. And if we could go back in the past, there would be some things that we would rectify. But I mean, it's all a part of the journey. It's all a part of you coming into yourself and understanding that, look, it doesn't really, I wouldn't say it doesn't make sense because you're going through it and it's hard, and it's hard to separate,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really and truly the best thing to do, because even if you find yourself on a path where you would have already taken that apple, or given somebody the opportunity to eat the forbidden fruit, as the reason just call it. But listen, man, there's always hope. There's always a comeback
There is.
to the purity journey. And so we can always start over fresh. Sometimes people probably come and you might be ashamed of the fact that you would have already gone down that path, or
Exactly.
but there's always a way to come back.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a way to come back from those parts. And if you have not gone down there yet, and you're probably feeling pressured and you're probably thinking about it, think a little deeper.
Yeah.
Think a little deeper.
Find out what you
Because
want for yourself.
yeah, and you know what you want for yourself. So it cannot just be because a friend has done it, or because somebody's thinking about doing it, or because you are pressured. Number one, if you are pressured into these things, this means that that person doesn't have your best interest at heart.
True.
Chances are they just need that particular thing. And I've had friends that they would have done that thing in the past, and it's almost like after that the relationship just went
Went
the
down.
relationship goes right out the road. Because if it's almost like if you can be tested on this path, the enemy will come for you.
True.
Afraid to come for you. And he will come and come speedily. And even as we grow older, we will learn and we understand. And when for many it's hard to come back, because it's a path where you have to really think the going down that apple path and getting that apple stolen, or whether you give for free or whatever. It's
There
a
is no
path
return. Is a
that
point of no return.
it's a point
It's an
of
experience.
literally no return.
So my advice would have been to young people out there. There is nothing wrong with holding on to your apple. You know, there is nothing wrong with being that person that is still holding on to that level of purity, because mind you, not everybody who says they're experiencing it are experiencing anything. Sometimes they just want to know that somebody else experienced it and what their experiences were, and they make
Mm-hmm.
their judgment from it to say, okay, I am going to try. However, in this generation, because of what is out there in the media, of course, there are a lot of teens that will think, all right, or even young people in general will go out there
Mm-hmm.
with the need to have a companion or whatever, and will find themselves, but realize that, boy, this is not the type of person that I wanted to be. I did not see myself here. But believe me, if it is that you view yourself as well as the relationship that you're in as something valuable, then you're going to treat it with that level of value. And it means
Yes.
that you also would have valued yourself. So it's not about just valuing the relationship, but value yourself, value your opinion as well as the next person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we are not experts, we are not psychologists or counselors, but I mean, we would have gone through the teenage years, and this is just a little teen talk into understanding some things that are in the box, Pandora's box. It's not easy. It's not easy on the journey. As I just said, we are by no means professionals. We're just here, and we're just talking on the surface as it relates to some things that we would have experienced, or persons would have experienced, or just generally talking about these issues as it relates to relationships, insecurities, and much more. And so if you like this talk, remember to tell a friend that we are over here and we are blooming by grace. This is a space, the only place where you will bloom by grace. But no matter, may you never forget that you, yes, you are not too dirty for God to cleanse. You are not too broken for God to mend. You are not too far for God to reach, or too guilty to fall at His feet. So even as we journey and even as we go, remember, we are all blooming and blooming by grace. There's nothing that you are going through that I never went through, that your mommy never went through, your family members, that Nevisa and her friends never went through. I mean, the journey might look a little differently, but it's called life. We are all on this journey called life. We have hiccups, we have mishaps, we have disadvantages, miscarriage, if you want to call it that. But no matter what it is, we can all come back and stand firm, believing and knowing that he who promises will never fail and he will indeed keep us to the end. So, thank you for watching this episode of Blooming by Grace. We do look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.